On our anniversary, he begged for forgiveness. I gave it to him. Then I showed him the file that would destroy his life. My husband didn't just break my heart, he broke my entire world. And the scariest part, he had no idea I was watching. For a year, I sat alone in our house, wondering what was wrong with me. Then I saw them together at that coffee shop, and I finally understood. Nothing was wrong with me. Everything was wrong with him. He thought he was so clever. A wife at home who loved him and a girlfriend on the side who excited him. The moment I saw them laughing together, something inside me died. But something else was born, something patient, something dangerous, something that would destroy him. He came home that night and kissed me goodnight, just like always. He had no idea I already knew everything. He had no idea his life was about to end. On our anniversary, he got down on his knees and begged for another chance. I looked into his eyes and said I forgave him. He never knew that was the moment I destroyed him. This isn't a love story. This is a story about what happens when a good woman finally breaks. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. My name is Ella, and I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about love, but more than that, it's a story about the poison that can grow in the space where love used to be. It's about the quiet moments before a storm and the deafening silence after. Most of all, it's a story about a promise. A promise I made to myself on a cold Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my car in a parking lot, staring at a coffee shop I'd been to 100 times before. That was the day my life split into two parts. Everything before I walked through that door, and everything after. Before, I was Ella Mason, a girl from a small town in Ohio named Granville. It was the kind of town where everybody knew everybody, where the biggest excitement of the year was the 4th of July parade and the county fair in the fall. My parents still lived in the same white colonial house on Elm Street where I grew up, with the big front porch and the swing my father hung the summer I turned 10. My mother was a high school English teacher, and my father ran the local hardware store. I had a younger brother named Ben who was studying to be a veterinarian at Ohio State. We were a normal, happy, slightly boring American family. I met Jack when I was a junior at the University of Illinois. He was a senior, studying architecture. I was in the art history building, struggling to carry a stack of heavy textbooks and a giant portfolio of my latest project, when he appeared out of nowhere. "Here, let me help you with those," he said, his voice warm and easy. I looked up and there he was, Jack with the easy smile and the eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He had dark hair that was always a little too long, falling across his forehead, and he had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the world. He took half my books without waiting for an answer, and we walked across campus together. By the time we reached the art building, I had agreed to have coffee with him the next day. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a relationship, and within 6 months, I couldn't imagine my life without him. He was brilliant and ambitious, but he also had this goofy side that made me laugh until my stomach hurt. He'd build elaborate forts out of cardboard boxes in his apartment, and we'd watch old movies inside them. He'd leave me little hand-drawn cartoons in my textbooks, funny sketches of us doing silly things. It felt like a cliché, the artist and the builder, but to us, it was destiny. He'd bring me coffee while I pulled all-nighters in the studio, and I'd go with him to site visits, pointing out the way the light fell on a new building's facade. We were a team. We were partners. After he graduated, a year before me, he got a job in Chicago. He commuted back on weekends to see me, 4 hours each way on a Greyhound bus, never complaining once. That's how committed he was. That's how committed I thought we both were. After my graduation, we moved to Chicago together. It was his dream city, a place of towering glass and steel, a living canvas for an architect. I found a job at a small gallery in the West Loop called the Canvas Room, curating exhibitions for local artists, and he landed a position at a prestigious firm downtown called Sterling and Associates. We got a tiny apartment in Lincoln Park with a creaky floorboard in the hallway and a radiator that clanked all winter. The bedroom was so small we could barely fit our queen-sized bed, and the kitchen had exactly 2 feet of counter space. But we were poor and we were happy. We'd spend Sundays walking along the lakefront, holding hands and talking about our future. A house with a backyard, 2 kids, a golden retriever. We even picked out names for the kids we didn't have yet: Emma for a girl, Liam for a boy. It was the American dream, and we were building it, brick by brick. After 5 years together, we were married. It was a small ceremony in the Chicago Botanical Gardens in Glencoe, with just our families and a few close friends. My mother cried. My father gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Jack's dad, a quiet man who reminded me so much of Jack, shook my hand and told me to take care of his boy. I wore my mother's wedding dress, a beautiful lace gown from 1985 that she'd preserved perfectly, and Jack cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. Not just a little misty-eyed. He full-on cried, tears streaming down his face, and he didn't even try to hide them. That's the man I married. That's the man I thought I knew. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood in Ravenswood. It was a fixer-upper, a rundown Victorian from the 1920s that had been neglected for decades, but we didn't care. We saw the potential. We spent every weekend for 2 years painting walls, sanding floors, tearing out ugly cabinets, and arguing about furniture. He wanted modern and minimalist. I wanted cozy and traditional. We compromised on a weird mix that somehow worked. It was ours. Every nail we hammered, every wall we painted, was a declaration of our future together. Our life was exactly as I had pictured it. Then, about a year ago, the picture started to blur. Little things at first. Jack started working late. A lot. He'd always been dedicated, but now he was staying at the office until 9, 10, sometimes 11 o'clock at night. He'd come home exhausted, barely able to mutter a hello before collapsing into bed. I understood. He was working on a huge new project, a high-rise residential tower on the river called the Vista. He said it was the biggest opportunity of his career. "It's going to put us on the map, Elle," he'd say, his face lit by the blue glow of his laptop even at the dinner table. "If this project goes through, I'll be made a senior partner. We'll be set for life. Just a few more months of this, and then things will go back to normal." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I'd pour him a glass of whiskey and rub his shoulders, trying to knead out the tension that had taken up permanent residence there. I'd make his favorite meals, lasagna and meatloaf and chicken parmesan, and leave them in the fridge with little notes. For my hardworking husband, love you. I was being a supportive wife. That's what you do. You support your partner through the hard times, but the hard times stretched on. The few more months turned into a year. The late nights became a habit. He started taking his work phone to the bathroom with him, something he'd never done before. He'd get a faraway look in his eyes when I was talking to him, like he was listening to a different, more interesting conversation in his head. He stopped reaching for me in bed. He'd turn over, mutter "good night, love you," and be snoring within minutes. Our Sundays on the lakefront became a distant memory. Our talks about Emma and Liam stopped entirely. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home. I'd wander from room to room, straightening picture frames that weren't crooked, dusting surfaces that were already clean. I'd talk to myself just to hear a human voice. The silence in the house was deafening. My only company was the clanking radiator and the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe, and wondering what I had done wrong. Was I not pretty enough anymore? Was I not interesting enough? Had I become boring, predictable, the kind of wife a man takes for granted? My friends tried to reassure me. Sarah, my best friend since college, would tell me, "He's just stressed, Ella. It's a demanding job. You know how ambitious he is. Don't borrow trouble." My mother told me to be patient. "Marriage has its ups and downs, sweetie. This is just a down. It'll pass. Your father and I went through a rough patch too, remember? When his mother was sick, it tested us, but we came out stronger." But a part of me, a deep, primal part, knew it wasn't just stress, it wasn't just ambition, it was something else. Something I was afraid to put a name to. Something that made my stomach clench every time his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a secret little smile before typing out a quick reply. Something that made my heart pound when he'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. That nagging feeling led me to the coffee shop that Tuesday. It was a place called The Grind, a hipster spot with exposed brick and mismatched furniture, about a block from Jack's office. I had a doctor's appointment in the city that afternoon, just my annual checkup, and I thought I'd surprise him. Bring him a latte and one of those overpriced cronuts he loved. I hadn't called him. I wanted to see the look on his face when he saw me, that crinkly-eyed smile that always made my heart skip. I found a parking spot right on the street, which felt like a sign, a good omen. I walked towards his office building, latte in one hand, cronut in the other. I was picturing his smile. I was imagining the hug, the brief moment of warmth that would remind me of the man I married. I was thinking about how I'd suggest we go to that new Italian place for dinner this weekend, just the two of us, reconnect a little. I never made it to his office. As I passed by the grind, I glanced through the big plate glass window, a completely random, idle glance. And then my world stopped. There he was, my Jack. He wasn't at his office, slaving away over blueprints. He was sitting at a small, corner table with a woman. I didn't recognize her. She was blonde, with her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She was wearing a fitted black blazer, very professional, very chic. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting on the table, her fingers just inches from his. And Jack was looking at her the way he used to look at me. His eyes were soft, focused entirely on her, crinkled at the corners with that smile I thought was mine alone. His hand reached across the table and covered hers. He leaned in and said something that made her blush. The latte slipped from my fingers and hit the pavement with a sickening thud, the lid popping off and spilling brown liquid into the gutter. The cronut rolled away into the street, getting crushed by a passing taxi. I couldn't move. I was frozen on the sidewalk, a statue of shock and disbelief. I felt the world tilt on its axis. The sounds of the city, the cars, the people, the distant siren, all faded into a dull, muffled roar. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just watching them. He was so animated, so present. His hands moved as he talked, sketching something in the air, probably describing one of his buildings. She listened, captivated. He was the Jack I had lost, the passionate, engaged, alive man I had fallen in love with, and he was giving that version of himself to someone else. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a clean break, like a twig. It was a deep, guttural crack, like the sound of ice breaking on a frozen lake in the spring. The shock was instantly replaced by a hot, blinding rage. I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to throw something, to smash that perfect little scene into a million pieces. I wanted to grab her by that sleek ponytail and yank her out of her chair. I wanted to make him feel a fraction of the pain that was tearing me apart. I took a step towards the door. My hand was on the cool metal handle. I could feel the vibration of the door as someone inside walked past. I was seconds away from destroying everything. But then I stopped. I didn't go in. In that moment, a different voice, colder and calmer than the rage, spoke up inside my head. It was a voice I didn't recognize, a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. It said, "Don't, not yet. Don't give him the satisfaction of a scene. Don't let him see you fall apart. Don't let him be the victim of your anger. If you go in there now, you become the crazy wife. He becomes the poor guy with the unstable woman at home. You lose, so I didn't. I took my hand off the handle. I turned away from the window. I walked back to my car on legs that felt like they were made of rubber, like I was learning to walk all over again. I got in, shut the door, and sat there in the sudden, suffocating silence. And that's where I made my promise. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, at the pale, shocked face of a woman I barely recognized, and I whispered it out loud. He will pay for this, not with anger, not with tears, but with everything. Driving home was a blur. I don't remember the expressway or the traffic lights or pulling into my driveway. I just remember walking into our silent house. The house we had built together. And everything in it felt like a lie. The wedding photo on the mantel, me in my mother's dress, him in his tux, both of us beaming with hope. The painting I'd bought on our first anniversary, a beautiful abstract piece by a local artist that we'd saved for months to afford. The couch we'd picked out together, arguing for 3 hours in the furniture store before finally compromising on a dark gray sectional. It was all tainted. Every object, every memory, was now a piece of evidence in the crime he had committed against us. I went into his home office. It was his sanctuary, the room I was never supposed to clean, the room where he kept his blueprints and his scale models and his architecture books. I'd always respected his privacy. I'd knock before entering, even just to ask if he wanted coffee. Not anymore. I started opening drawers. I found his personal phone, the one he claimed he only used for work, hidden under a stack of old magazines. It was password protected. I tried a few dates. Our anniversary, his birthday, my birthday, nothing, our wedding date, nothing. On a whim, I typed in his mother's birthday, March 15th. It opened, and there it was, the proof. Text messages, dozens of them, stretching back for over 6 months. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Sweet, flirty, intimate messages. Messages about how much he missed her, how he couldn't stop thinking about her, how she made him feel alive again. Her name was Chloe. She was a junior associate at his firm. I saw photos. Photos of them at restaurants I'd begged him to take me to, but he was always too tired. Photos of them in a hotel room, her in a silky robe, him shirtless and smiling. The hotel was the Langham, downtown, the one with the big windows overlooking the river. He'd told me he was there for a work conference. I remembered that night. I'd made myself a sad little dinner of leftovers and watched a movie alone, feeling sorry for myself for being lonely while my husband worked. I read every single one. With each message, the rage inside me cooled and crystallized into something else. Something hard and sharp and precise, like a diamond formed under immense pressure. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the systematic dismantling of my life, of my trust, of my love, of my very identity. He hadn't just had an affair. He had crafted a lie, day after day, for a year. He had looked me in the eye and told me he loved me, every single morning and every single night, all while planning his next secret meeting with her. He had let me doubt myself, let me question my own worth, let me spiral into insecurity and loneliness, all so he could have his fun. I didn't cry, the tears wouldn't come, I just felt a terrifying, wonderful clarity, a purpose. I knew exactly what I had to do. That night, when he came home, I was in the kitchen, making his favorite pasta, spaghetti carbonara. He looked tired, but he offered me a weak smile. "Hey, you, long day, sorry I'm so late, the Vista project is killing me." "It's okay," I said, my voice steady, calm, almost cheerful. "I know you're busy, I made you dinner. Go wash up." He looked surprised. "You didn't have to do that, you're the best, Elle." He came over and gave me a quick peck on the cheek, a habit, an empty gesture. It was the same kiss he probably gave his secretary. I didn't flinch. I smiled. Over dinner, he talked about his day. The usual complaints about demanding clients and incompetent contractors. I nodded and asked questions, playing the role of the devoted wife. I was an actress in my own life, and the performance felt exhilarating, empowering. "How was your day?" he asked, finally, taking a big bite of pasta. "Oh, you know," I said, twirling my own fork, watching the spaghetti wind around the tines. Quiet, went to the gallery. Had a meeting about a new exhibition we're planning. Picked up some groceries. The usual. I paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, my voice light and casual. "Oh, I stopped by a coffee shop near your office today. The Grind, I think it's called. Cute place." His fork froze halfway to his mouth. A flicker of panic crossed his face, there and gone in an instant, like a fish jumping in still water. He was good. He recovered quickly. But I was watching. I saw it. "Oh, yeah," he said, his voice a little too high, a little too casual. "That place has great lattes. Why didn't you come say hi? I was in the office all afternoon." I looked him directly in the eyes, holding his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. I wanted him to feel a flicker of something, a tiny seed of doubt. "I didn't see you there," I said, a small, sad smile on my lips. "You must have been working." He relaxed, a visible wave of relief washing over him. He actually let out a tiny breath. He didn't know, he thought he had gotten away with it. "Yeah, must have been in a meeting," he mumbled, looking down at his plate, suddenly very interested in his pasta. And in that moment, my plan was cemented. He was a liar and a cheat, but he was also arrogant. He thought he was so clever, so careful, so in control. He thought he could have his perfect little life with his sweet, trusting wife and his perfect little secret on the side. He was about to learn how wrong he was. He was about to learn that the sweet, trusting wife was the most dangerous enemy he could ever make. The first phase of my plan was patience. It was the hardest part. I had to continue being Ella, the sweet, trusting, slightly oblivious wife. I made his coffee in the morning, just the way he liked it, with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. I packed his lunches, turkey and Swiss on sourdough, with a little note. "Have a great day, love you." I kept the house spotless, vacuuming and dusting and organizing with a manic energy that I poured into every chore. I even initiated sex a few times, just to keep up appearances, to make sure he had no reason to suspect anything. Every touch, every kiss, every "I love you" that left my lips felt like a lie, a piece of my soul chipping away. But I did it, I had to. The performance was necessary for the final act. While I was playing the doting wife, I was also working. Quietly, methodically, like a spider spinning a web one thread at a time. First, the finances. I had always handled the bills, so I had access to all our accounts. I started digging. I found credit card statements for a card I didn't know existed, a Visa card in just his name, sent to a P.O. box downtown. Small, recurring charges. A hotel downtown. A fancy restaurant Alinea where a meal for two costs over $500. A lingerie store. A florist. I meticulously photographed every statement, every suspicious transaction. I saved them in a folder on my computer labeled recipes, hidden among 1,000 other recipe files. Then, the messages. Over the next few weeks, whenever he was in the shower or asleep, I'd grab his phone and photograph all the new texts. I even managed to get into his email. The password was the same as his phone. People are so predictable, so arrogant in their secrecy. There I found more. Emails to her, full of the same declarations of love, the same plans for their next meeting. But more importantly, I found the evidence of his lies to his firm. He was taking long lunches with her, leaving early on Fridays, faking site visits that never happened. He was using company time and, I suspected, company resources to fuel his affair. He was risking his career, our future, for her. I started following them, not every day, but often enough. I learned their routine. They met for coffee at the grind every morning before he went to the office. They had long lunches at a little French bistro 3 blocks away called Le Petit Paris. Sometimes, they'd disappear for an hour or two in the afternoon, and I knew exactly where they were going. I was a ghost, watching them from across the street, from inside my car, from behind a newspaper in the park across from the hotel. I took pictures, lots of pictures. I bought a camera with a powerful zoom lens, a fancy Nikon that cost more than I wanted to spend, but it was an investment in my future. Pictures of them holding hands. Pictures of them kissing outside the bistro. Pictures of them going into the Langham Hotel, laughing together like teenagers playing hooky. It was a strange, detached feeling. It was like watching a movie about my own life, a tragicomedy where I was both the wronged heroine and the vengeful villain. I felt no sadness anymore, just a grim satisfaction. I was gathering ammunition. I was building my case. I was becoming the architect of his destruction, and I was good at it. The hardest part was keeping it from my friends and family. Sarah, my best friend, called me one night around 11. I was in bed, Jack was still working late, which meant he was with her. "You sound weird, Ella," she said, her voice full of concern. Distant, flat. "Is everything okay with you and Jack?" I almost told her. I almost broke down and spilled everything. But I stopped myself. "Everything's fine," I said, the lie rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. "Just a little tired. Work is busy. The gallery has a big show coming up." "You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" she pressed. "You know I'm here for you, no matter what." "Of course, Sarah. You're the first person I'd call, I promise." I hated lying to her. She was my person, the one who held my hair back when I drank too much in college, who flew in from New York for my wedding, who cried with me when my grandmother died. But I couldn't tell her. Not yet. No one could know. This was my battle, and I had to fight it alone. After 3 weeks of this, I had a file on Jack that would ruin him. Professionally, financially, and personally. It was beautiful, a masterpiece of documentation. I had a binder, a big 3-ring binder organized with tabs. Tab 1, text messages. Tab 2, emails. Tab 3, photographs. Tab 4, credit card statements. Tab 5, a timeline of his lies, cross-referenced with my calendar, showing every single night he told me he was working late but was actually with her. It was time for phase 2, the dismantling. It started with his career. Jack's entire identity, his entire sense of self-worth, was wrapped up in his job. He was going to be a star architect. He was going to be the next Frank Gehry. The Vista project, that high-rise on the river, was his baby, his ticket to the big leagues. So that's where I struck first. I knew he had a huge presentation coming up, a final pitch to the primary investors, a group of wealthy Chicago businessmen who held the purse strings. It was the most important meeting of his career. The night before, while he was asleep, I went into his home office. His laptop was on his desk, and of course, it was unlocked. He was so trusting, so arrogant. I didn't delete his files. That would be too obvious, too easily traced. Instead, I made a few subtle changes. I swapped a few key architectural renderings with older, inferior versions from a previous, rejected proposal. The new ones were sleeker, more innovative. The old ones were clunky, outdated. I changed the figures on a crucial cost analysis sheet, reducing the projected profits and increasing the estimated expenses, making the project look 10% over budget and 5% less profitable. I printed out a new set of proposals, the altered ones, and put them in his briefcase, right on top of the originals. Then I went back to bed and slept like a baby. The next day, I waited. I couldn't go to work. I called in sick and stayed home, pacing the floors, checking my phone every 2 minutes. Finally, around 6, I heard his key in the lock. He came home a broken man. He didn't even look at me. He just walked into the living room, loosened his tie, and slumped onto the couch, his head in his hands. I brought him a glass of whiskey, my role as the supportive wife, the comforter. "What happened, honey?" I asked, my voice full of concern, my hand rubbing his back. He shook his head, his face pale and drawn. "I don't know, it was a disaster. The numbers were wrong. The drawings, they were old, rejected versions. I looked like a complete amateur, like I didn't know what I was doing. The investors were not impressed. They pulled out. The project, it's on hold. Indefinitely." He looked up at me, his eyes full of confusion and despair, searching for answers I knew I wouldn't give. "I don't understand. I checked everything. It was all perfect last night. I had it all laid out." I sat down beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. Maybe it was just a computer glitch, or maybe you grabbed the wrong files by mistake." Inside, a tiny, cold fist of satisfaction clenched. The first domino had fallen. The next week, I targeted his finances. I started with the secret credit card. I made a few anonymous phone calls to the credit card company, using a burner phone I'd bought at a drugstore with cash. I reported the card as stolen and requested a new one be sent to a different address, a fake address I'd made up. His card was canceled immediately, and when the new one arrived at the non-existent address, it was returned to sender. He had no idea. The recurring hotel charges stopped, the expensive dinners stopped, the lingerie store purchases stopped, and he had no way to explain it to Chloe. I could only imagine the awkward conversations, the excuses, the lies he had to invent to cover for the missing funds. It gave me a small, petty thrill. Then, I turned my attention to our joint accounts. I had a friend from college, a quiet, brilliant guy named Mark who worked in IT security. He'd always had a little crush on me, a sweet, unspoken thing that I'd never acknowledged. I called him and asked for a small, illegal favor. I told him I was in a bad situation, that I needed to protect myself financially from a partner who was draining our accounts. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Tell me what you need." I needed him to set up a system that would take a tiny, almost imperceptible amount of money from our checking account every week and funnel it into a private account I had opened in just my name at a different bank. $50 here, $100 there. It was set up to look like a banking error or a small recurring subscription fee that Jack would never notice. With Mark's help, it was done in a day. Jack, so wrapped up in his own misery and the crisis at work, never noticed. He was too busy licking his wounds, too busy trying to salvage his reputation at the firm, too busy feeling sorry for himself. Over the next few months, that small, steady stream of money grew into a substantial nest egg. Over $8,000, my escape fund. But the affair itself was the main target. I needed to sever that tie, to take away the one thing that made him feel good about himself, the one bright spot in his suddenly dismal life. And I had to do it in a way that made him look like the villain he was, that made her see him for what he really was. A liar and a cheat who would eventually do to her what he'd done to me. I started with Chloe. I sent her an anonymous email from a burner account I'd set up, a Gmail address with a random string of numbers. It was simple. Just a few photos. A photo of Jack and me at our wedding, kissing under the huppah. A photo of us on our last vacation, him with his arm around me, smiling at the camera, both of us tanned and happy. A photo of our house, the one we'd bought together. The email had no text, no explanation, just the subject line, "Do you know who I am?" I watched them the next week. I followed them to Le Petit Paris, their usual bistro. The atmosphere was different. They weren't laughing. They were sitting stiffly, barely talking, the silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her napkin, avoiding his eyes. He looked desperate, leaning in, talking animatedly, trying to recapture the magic. My little seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already sprouting. Next, I decided to apply more pressure. I knew Chloe was ambitious. She wasn't just having fun. She was sleeping with a senior architect, and I suspected she thought it would help her career, give her an edge, a mentor in high places. So I used that against her. I sent another anonymous email, this time to the head of HR at Sterling and Associates, a woman named Patricia Holloway who had a reputation for being a stickler for rules. The email contained a single, damning photograph of Jack and Chloe kissing passionately outside the office building, with a timestamp from a Tuesday afternoon when they should both have been working. The subject line read, "Inappropriate fraternization on company time and property. Thought you should know." The fallout was swift and brutal. Jack came home 2 days later, looking like he'd been hit by a truck and then backed over for good measure. He poured himself a triple whiskey without even saying hello, his hands shaking. "What's wrong?" I asked, knowing full well, my heart pounding with anticipation. He just shook his head, downing half the glass in one gulp. "HR. An anonymous complaint, about me and someone at the office." He couldn't even bring himself to say her name to me. "They're investigating. Interviews, the whole thing. This could cost me everything, Ella. Everything I've worked for." I went to him, wrapping my arms around him from behind, resting my chin on his shoulder. "It'll be okay," I whispered into his ear, my voice dripping with fake sympathy, with manufactured concern. "It's probably just a misunderstanding. Someone with a grudge. You'll explain it to them, and it'll all blow over." He held onto me tightly, burying his face in my hair, his body shaking with silent sobs. He was holding his wife, the one person he thought was his safe harbor, his refuge from the storm. He had no idea he was clutching the very hurricane that was destroying him. The investigation didn't end well for him. He wasn't fired, not technically. He was too valuable for that, too talented. But he was given a formal written warning that would stay in his file forever. And more damagingly, he was permanently taken off the Vista project. The project was his masterpiece, and now it was gone, handed to a rival architect in the firm. His star was fading. He became a ghost at his own company, a cautionary tale whispered about in the hallways, the guy who threw away his career for an affair. Chloe, fearing for her own job, her own future, ended things with him immediately. I watched it happen. I was sitting in my car across the street from the bistro when she did it, my camera ready, just in case. I saw her get up from the table, her face a mask of cold fury and disgust. She said something sharp to him, pointing her finger, then grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving him sitting there alone, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He looked small, defeated, utterly alone. He came home that night and told me everything. Well, not everything. He told me a version. He told me he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd been weak and stupid, that it was over, and that he was so sorry. He cried. He actually cried, big, ugly, heaving sobs. He begged me to forgive him. He dropped to his knees in front of me, clutching my hands, telling me I was the only woman he had ever loved, that she meant nothing, that it was just a stupid fling, a midlife crisis, a moment of insanity. I listened. I let him talk. I let him cry. And when he was done, I did what any good, forgiving wife would do. I took his face in my hands, looked into his red-rimmed, desperate eyes, and said, "I forgive you, Jack. We all make mistakes. We're human. We'll get through this, together." The relief that flooded his face was almost palpable, a physical thing. He collapsed into my arms, sobbing into my shoulder, thanking me, telling me I was an angel, a saint, the best wife in the world. He thought he had been saved. He thought his confession had cleansed him, that my forgiveness had wiped the slate clean. He had no idea. He had just walked into the final trap, the one I had been building for months. His confession was the last piece of evidence I needed. You see, a few weeks before, I had planted a small digital recorder in our living room, hidden behind a stack of books on the shelf, right next to the wedding photo. It was a tiny device, no bigger than a pack of gum, with a memory card that could hold hours of audio. It had captured his entire confession. His words, his tears, his admission of guilt. It was perfect. The piece de resistance. The next few weeks were the strangest of all. He was a changed man. He came home early from work before 6 every single day. He brought me flowers, not just once, but twice a week. He wanted to talk, to go for walks, to cook dinner together, to rebuild what he had broken. He was trying so hard to be the husband he should have been all along, the husband I had deserved. And I played my part. I went on the walks. I accepted the flowers. I cooked with him. I smiled and nodded and played the part of the loving, forgiving wife, the one who was healing, the one who was giving him a second chance. We even went to a marriage counselor, a kindly older woman named Dr. Evelyn Ross. I sat there in her soft, beige office, surrounded by ficus trees and boxes of tissues, and I talked about my feelings of hurt and betrayal, my struggle to trust again, my hope for our future. I was so convincing, so genuine that I almost believed it myself. All the while, I was cataloging every word Jack said in my head, noting every admission, every detail for future use. But the counselor's office was a goldmine. In our sessions, he admitted to the affair in detail, to the depth of his deception, to the lies he had told me, to the year of my life he had stolen. And with each session, the recorder in my purse, the same little device from the living room, was quietly documenting it all. I had him on tape multiple times, confessing to everything. I was patient. I waited for the perfect moment, the theatrical moment, the moment when the impact would be greatest. And it came 6 months after I first saw them in that coffee shop. It was our 6th wedding anniversary. He planned a beautiful evening. A reservation at the Signature Room, the fancy restaurant on the 95th floor of the John Hancock Center, where we'd had our engagement dinner 6 years ago. A new dress, a stunning navy blue silk number, which he'd bought for me, was laid out on the bed with a note. For my beautiful wife. Let's start over. I love you, Jack. I put on the dress. I did my hair and makeup carefully, perfectly. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. A beautiful, composed, and utterly determined stranger. A woman who had been through hell and come out the other side with a heart of ice and a mind like a steel trap. He took me to the restaurant. We had a lovely dinner. He was charming, attentive, the man I fell in love with, the man I had married. He talked about the future, about taking a trip to Italy, to Tuscany, where we'd always dreamed of going. He talked about maybe finally starting that family, about little Emma and Liam. He was painting a picture of our second chance, and it was a beautiful picture, full of light and hope and possibility. It was almost enough to make me forget. Almost, but not quite. After dinner, we came home. He opened a bottle of expensive champagne, Dom Perignon, the same kind we'd had at our wedding. We sat in the living room, the same room where he had confessed, the same room where I had recorded his words. He raised his glass. To us, he said, his eyes shining with what I think was genuine love and hope, a desperate, fragile hope. To our new beginning, to the next 60 years. I raised my glass, I didn't drink. I just looked at him over the rim, my eyes steady, my face calm. A new beginning, I repeated, my voice soft and thoughtful. That's a lovely thought, Jack. He smiled, that old, familiar smile, the one that crinkled his eyes. I love you, Ella, I always have. I was an idiot, a fool, the biggest fool in Chicago, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I promise. I nodded slowly, a small, sad smile on my lips. I know you will, and I want you to know I've been doing a lot of thinking too, about us, about the last year, about everything. His smile widened. He thought I was about to make a similar declaration, to pledge my love and commitment to this new beginning. He was so ready to close this chapter, to lock it away in the past and start the next. He leaned forward, eager, hopeful. I've been thinking about us, I continued, setting my champagne glass down on the coffee table, right next to the stack of books that no longer hid a recorder. About the last year, about how you looked at me every single day and lied. About how you told me you loved me while you were loving someone else. About how you let me sit in this house, alone and confused and doubting myself, wondering what I had done wrong to drive you away. The smile on his face began to fade, replaced by a flicker of confusion, a tiny furrow between his brows. Ella, what are you? I held up a hand to stop him, a calm, authoritative gesture. I've been thinking about all the work I put in, not into our marriage, but into you, into documenting your lies, into building a case, into making sure that when this moment came, you would have nothing left. No career, no money, no dignity, no second chance. I reached behind the couch and pulled out a large, thick manila envelope, stuffed with papers and photographs. I held it up, letting it hang in the air between us. Do you know what this is? He shook his head, his eyes wide, the confusion deepening into something else, something like fear. This, I said, my voice clear and steady, like a judge pronouncing a sentence, is you. This is the last 6 months of your life and the last year of mine. Inside, you'll find copies of every text message you sent to Chloe, going back over a year. Copies of every email. Photographs of you two together, dozens of them, in high resolution. Copies of the credit card statements for the card you thought I didn't know about, showing every hotel, every meal, every gift. A recording of your confession to me in this very room, on your knees, begging for forgiveness. And recordings of everything you've said in our marriage counseling sessions with Dr. Ross. Every admission, every detail. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale as paper. He looked from the envelope to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, gasping for air, for words that wouldn't come. But why? He finally whispered, his voice cracked and broken. You said you forgave me, you said we'd get through this together. You went to counseling with me, you let me believe, you let me hope. I smiled. It was a cold, genuine smile, the first real smile I'd felt in months. I lied, Jack. You taught me how. You taught me that the people you love most are the ones you can hurt the most. You taught me that words are just sounds, that promises are just wishes, that love is just a word people use to get what they want. I learned from the best. I opened the envelope and pulled out a sheaf of papers, holding them up one by one like a prosecutor presenting evidence. This first set is going to your boss, Mr. Sterling, first thing tomorrow morning. It includes your confession, the photos of you and Chloe, the evidence of you using company time and resources to conduct your affair, and the recordings from our sessions. I imagine they'll be very interested to see it, especially given the previous anonymous complaint and the disastrous meeting where your perfect presentation fell apart. Funny how that happened, isn't it? His eyes widened further, the fear turning into dawning horror. That was you, the presentation, the numbers, the drawings, that was you. I just continued, enjoying the look on his face, the slow crumbling of his world. This next set is going to your mother. She always thought I was such a lovely girl, so good for her son. I'm sure she'd love to know what her precious boy has been up to, how he spent his evenings while his wife waited at home. And these, I said, pulling out another stack, are for all our friends. Sarah, Tom, everyone who came to our wedding, everyone who toasted us and wished us well. I think they deserve to know the real Jack, the man behind the charming smile. And this, I said, pulling out the final, most official-looking document, a thick sheaf of papers bound with a blue cover, is the file for my divorce lawyer, Anita Greenberg, the best divorce attorney in Chicago. It contains all the evidence of your infidelity, which, in the state of Illinois, is grounds for a fault divorce. It also contains the financial records. The secret credit card, the money you spent on her, over $15,000 in the last year alone. My lawyer is very confident that I will get the house, the car, and a very substantial settlement, enough to start my new life comfortably. I paused, letting that sink in. He was ashen, speechless, his hands gripping the arms of the couch like he was holding on for dear life. Oh, and speaking of finances, I added, my voice light, almost cheerful, you might want to check our joint account. You'll notice it's been slowly dwindling for the past 6 months. A little here, a little there. That money, almost $9,000, is already in an account in just my name at a different bank. Consider it a down payment on the pain you caused me, on the year of my life you stole. Consider it my severance package from this marriage. He looked around the room, at the life we had built, at the wedding photo on the mantel, at the painting we'd bought together, and saw it all crumbling around him, a house of cards in a hurricane. The arrogance was gone, the confidence was gone, the charm was gone. All that was left was a scared, stupid, pathetic man who had just lost everything. His career, his reputation, his money, his wife, his future. Why? He asked again, his voice a broken whisper, his eyes wet with tears. Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just scream at me, throw me out, file for divorce? Why did you do all this? Why did you torture me? I leaned forward, my face inches from his. I wanted him to see the truth in my eyes, the depth of what he had done, the consequences of his choices. I wanted him to understand. Because a simple goodbye wouldn't have been enough, Jack. Because you needed to understand. You needed to feel what it's like to have your world dismantled piece by piece, to have the rug pulled out from under you when you least expect it, to be lied to by the one person you trust most in the world. You took a year of my life. You took my trust, my happiness, my peace of mind, my sense of self. You made me feel like I was nothing, like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. I wanted you to know what that feels like. I wanted you to lose everything you cared about just like I did. This wasn't about revenge, Jack. This was about justice. This was about balance. This was about making sure you never, ever do this to anyone else. I stood up, leaving him sitting there, staring at the open envelope, at the physical proof of his own destruction, his own stupidity, his own cruelty. I walked to the door, then turned back for one last look. He looked so small, so utterly defeated, sitting on our couch under the wedding photo that now seemed like a monument to a lie, to a dream that never was. The papers will be served to you at work tomorrow morning, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion, empty and final. I've already packed a bag. It's in the car. I'll be staying with Sarah tonight. She's the first person I'm calling, by the way. I'm finally going to tell her everything. You can keep the champagne. I opened the front door and walked out, closing it quietly behind me. I stood on the porch of the house we had bought together, the house we had painted and sanded and filled with love, the house that was now just a building, just wood and nails and drywall. The night air was cool and clean, smelling of damp earth and the faint sweetness of someone's late-blooming roses. I took a deep breath, the first truly free breath I had taken in over a year. The stars were out, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast Chicago sky, scattered across the darkness like hope. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back, not once. Not at the house, not at the life I was leaving behind, because the story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about the girl from Granville, Ohio, who moved to Chicago for a boy, and the woman who drove away from him, stronger and wiser and more whole than she had been in years. It was about learning that love can be a beautiful lie, but that the truth, even a painful one, can set you free. It was about the promise I made to myself in that parking lot, staring at a coffee shop, a promise I kept. My name is Ella Mason, and that is my story. A story about the poison in the space where love used to be, and the strange, wild flowers that can sometimes grow from the ruins. A story about betrayal and pain, but also about strength and survival. A story about a woman who was broken and who put herself back together, piece by piece, into something stronger than before. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got the house, the car, and a settlement that left me comfortable. Jack lost his job at Sterling and Associates shortly after I sent my package. The partners didn't appreciate the scandal, the distraction, the damage to their reputation. I heard he moved back to Ohio, to his parents' house, to start over. I heard he's working at a small firm in Columbus, designing strip malls and suburban subdivisions. I heard he's alone. I stayed in Chicago. I kept the house, sanded and painted a few more rooms, made it truly mine. I got a promotion at the gallery, then a better job at a bigger gallery in River North. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years, filling my canvases with bold colors and abstract shapes that expressed everything I couldn't put into words. I traveled. I went to Italy alone and walked through the vineyards of Tuscany and raised a glass of Chianti to my own freedom. I still think about him sometimes, about Jack. Not with love, not with hate, just with a kind of distant sadness, like remembering a character from a book you read long ago. I think about the man I married, the man who cried at our wedding, the man who built forts out of cardboard boxes and left cartoons in my textbooks. I wonder if that man ever really existed, or if he was always just a mask, a performance, a lie. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that Tuesday afternoon, standing outside the grind, watching my life shatter into a million pieces. I think about the woman I was before, the trusting, naive girl who believed in love and happily ever after. And I think about the woman I became, the one who learned to fight back, to plan, to survive. I don't know which one I prefer, but I know which one is stronger. My name is Ella Mason, and this is my story.